Hi, everyone. Sorry we're a couple minutes late. We were chit-chatting with others in the room. Welcome to our session on empowering her journey, creating personalized, data-driven pathways in women's mental health. My name is Heidi Williams. I work for ZS & Associates, a global management consulting firm. I work across a variety of clients in digital health innovation, but also with a huge focus in women's health. In fact, we have created a women's health expertise hub at ZS, where we focus on patient health equity, data acquisition, digital innovation, research, and education, really to drive more awareness around conditions that disproportionately affect women, such as mental health, which we're going to talk about today. As a side note, a personal story, I've also been a caregiver since I was 17. My grandmother died of bone cancer. My father had heart disease all throughout my 20s, and my mother battled cancer all throughout my 30s. And all while I was raising a family of my own. I have 3 boys that are grown now and off to college. So, oh, thank you. So this topic is near and dear to my heart. I'm very happy to be here with this very accomplished group of panelists. And with that said, I did want to let you know, we'll take questions throughout the panel. I'll keep an eye on the iPad and I'll try to weave them in. But obviously, feel free to connect with all the panelists after the session as well. So Shelja, would you go ahead with the introduction and please share a little bit about your own story.
I just press this to switch on. Oh, okay. Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us here. My name is Shelja Dixit. I'm a physician by training. I am CEO and founder of a company called Curio Digital Therapeutics. We focus on women's mental health across different life stages, and we do have a first FDA-approved Class 2 product focusing on postpartum depression. But here today, I am excited about this panel. I'm not joining as a founder, physician, or a technology enthusiast, but more as a mom who suffered from postpartum anxiety. So my journey with this company started when I took a pause and said, okay, how can I have a broader impact? And I suffered from postpartum anxiety. My son is now 18 years old, but I really struggled with stigma. That was the biggest thing for me. And I truly believe that digital, at least one of the things that would do for somebody like me is take care of stigma. And then, of course, there are access issues and many more things we'll talk about. So happy to be here, and thanks for joining again.
Good afternoon. I'm Gus Georgiadis. My title's Area Chairman for Gallagher Benefit Services. My region includes upstate New York and all of Pennsylvania and Delaware, and as you might know, Gallagher is an employee benefit consulting firm. I've had a rich history in the healthcare business. About half of that time, 20 plus years, I was on the carrier side with Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield, one of the largest blues plans in the country, and ran almost every part of that company, and then formed my own benefit consulting firm and merged that with Gallagher in 2012. During my time with Highmark, it was always apparent to me that women and women's health care issues never made it to center stage for a lot of reasons, but primarily because people making those decisions about what to focus on, what to prioritize, either weren't women or they didn't have a good sense as to what those unique needs and issues were. And it just always struck me that it was wrong. And I tried to do whatever I could in terms of, engaging on the product side and really focusing in on the market. And then when I left and formed this benefit consulting firm, early on in that journey, I also created a company where we began to consult with pharma companies initially who were struggling to bring drugs to market or didn't have good gross to net because when they brought the drugs to market, they were giving away too much in rebates. And it became apparent that there was this disconnect between what they were trying to accomplish and what needed to be done. And now that's turned into a business where we work with digital firms and device companies and really help them to better understand how to bring a product to market, what to do, what not to do. And so it's a pleasure to be with you today and look forward to the conversation.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Desiree Priestley. I'm the Chief Health Experience Officer at Otsuka Precision Health. You may have seen that we launched a digital therapeutic for major depressive disorder. So that is a lot of the reason I'm here, but first and foremost, I'm a woman. And I am also a person that has been in charge of my own family household health for, my entire life, and also while I've been married. So, women are 80% of the decision makers when it comes to your overall health and well-being in the household. And so I'm really excited to be here just from that perspective. Also, I'm a caregiver for my grandmother. We talked a lot about caregivers already today. Also, I've been in the mental health field for the past 10 years, dealing with patients and caregivers directly and seeing firsthand what a broken system it is and how many things it would be beneficial to bring forward to them to make sure that there's access for people and also a way to improve outcomes. And so passionate about all of these areas for those reasons, and excited to have the chat today.
Thanks very much. So let's start by talking about, we all know that digital health, there are so many challenges of bringing solutions to market. The ecosystem is so complex. And I think that, Shalja, you've really taken a very systematic approach to when you launched Curio Therapeutics. Can you talk about some of those specific things that you focused on?
Yeah, thank you, Hedy, for that question. So again, we all know that digital therapeutics have had like ups and downs. We are still seeing momentum going towards it with new codes that have just been approved. So I think things are on a good ramp up, if I may say. But from the very beginning, when we started our development, there were few things that we were very passionate about. Primarily, it also comes from my being a physician. We wanted to make sure that everybody in the ecosystem is actually on board with that, right? So of course, you start with patient. We all do that when we are making any digital therapeutic or any product. But we also went to physicians. We did a lot of ethnographic studies in their work, understanding their workflow. I have been part of EMR journey as well with GE EMR, and we all know how difficult it was for adoption of technology with physician landscape. And now we are telling physicians to do yet another thing, right? So it was very important for us to understand how any digital would integrate in the workflow. You may have good clinical data, but if it's not integrating and seamlessly easy to adopt, it's difficult for providers to adopt that. So that was one thing. And then of course with Guz and team, like we went to employers, self-insured employers, to understand their view about digital mental health and women. So, I think one key takeaway for me was just engaging everybody in the ecosystem was very important. And I'm seeing some positive coming out of that, because when we go to our provider organizations, we did a lot of Delphi panels and whatnot. We tell them that we know where exactly in your workflow this will fit, because we have already talked to 10 health systems, and this is how we are going to integrate it.
That's great, Shalja. Des, I'd like to ask you the same question. I think you, with Rejoin, have taken a slightly different approach.
So Rejoin was just launched in August, and so we are understanding that the population for major depressive disorder is largely patients and consumers in the commercial space. And so we felt it was really important to create a channel in which they can find a physician and actually engage in treatment through a virtual consult. So if you think about the broken mental health care landscape that we continue to talk about, there's not enough psychiatrists. There's often a long wait time to get to a psychiatrist or even their family practice provider. And there are people out there that they're still dealing with symptoms of major depressive disorder. So enabling a different pathway so that they can get the treatment they need in the palm of their hand was something that we took very seriously. And so that was the first sort of foray into the market, but we're definitely interested in contracting with payers and employers. We think there's a huge opportunity, just given the large population, over 25% of the American public is actually living with some sort of mental health condition. And so we want to get it into the hands of people, and that'll take a few different pathways, but we did want to make sure that we made it accessible to the people that need it right off the bat.
Yeah, and that's great, because I think what we're learning by launching digital solutions in this space is that people who need it, they will download the app and they will start engaging. I spoke to a gentleman last night who is launching an anxiety app with gamification. 60% of his members are not diagnosed with any kind of mental health condition. So people are looking for this help, and the anonymity, I think, is really important, but also having access to it when you need it, outside of a 9 to 5 or some kind of appointment. Gus, I wanted to ask you, from your experience working with the health plans, what are they expecting or what do they need from digital health innovators in this space?
Thanks. So I think the biggest issue and challenge is that the market is cluttered with a lot of point solutions that are addressing whatever the condition or category is. And those have all been introduced historically kind of as one-offs. Like a company comes in, introduces a point solution, a payer adopts it. And what I'm seeing is the market moving more toward one-stop solutions that are packaged. And so the key is to be able to differentiate as an organization yourself from all of the other clutter in the market and point out what is that differentiation and how does it approach a specific unique need. And then to be able to offer it in a way that could be white labeled if necessary. Because the key isn't as much physician adoption and even isn't as much singular individual downloading of an app. You really want scale. The only way your product is going to survive is if you have scale, and scale really requires coverage from the major health plans. Even a single employer isn't going to drive scale. Now, clearly a single employer will drive a need. You can experiment, you can create a pilot, you can create a white paper that would support it from that employer's perspective, but it's one employer. We've got thousands of employers. And so the key is to be able to address the market in a systematic way. It's segmenting and understanding where the key levers are to get you that level of acceptance beyond just, a provider or beyond just a member.
I think if I can just add to what Gus said, I completely agree with you. I think it's really important to map your influencers, right? So, we did a pilot with 2 employers, just very nice to help us understand what it is, and they will be influencers, hopefully, as we go and talk to more health plan, but you don't get scale, right? And then one employer really told me very clearly that, look, my HR team is like 3-4 people, and if you have to evaluate and you're coming with a solution that perhaps addresses 2%, 5%, or 10% of my employee population, that means I'll be looking at 10 of those solutions. And beyond, if I select one solution, I have to evaluate 20 more. So I'll very quickly end up evaluating 200 solutions, and that's not possible. So I think it's really important what you said, Gus. I fully agree that till you have coverage, it's very difficult to get scale, and that's what we are realizing as well. So.
That's great. So Des, I wanted to ask, part of this session is around being really data-driven, personalized, and I know with Rejoin and your EleveMe product, you've been able to achieve that. How did that happen?
So I think, at least at our organization, Otsuka Precision Health, we do take a very personalized approach to everything that we do. And I know in the last session, they were talking a little bit about the fact that still the high touch model. So we talk a lot about high tech and high touch, making sure that there's still that human component to what we're doing. Even though we're scaling digitally, we have these digital solutions that are great, whether it's Rejoin for major depressive disorder or EleveMe for caregivers. It's still really important to we have a team of nurses that can actually reach out and interact with people. And so we found that combination has been really important. And so beyond that, speaking of data, looking at the data, and I know there was a gentleman in the last session, again, talking about everything goes back to the patient journey. And that's the same approach that we take. So looking at the patient journey, understanding where those points of inflection are. Are there opportunities? Are there challenges? How do we address them? And how do we get to the right person at the right time with the right intervention? So that really is that marrying of high tech and high touch.
But the patient journey is critically important, I agree, but it's an odyssey as well. So in most patient journeys today, it is convoluted. It's not a simple, straightforward A to B, B to C. And I think that's where organizations have an opportunity to differentiate in the market by showing how disruptive they are in the patient journey to improve it, to make it more efficient, more effective. Otherwise, providers will kind of dig their heels in, and they won't want to work with a digital solution because it might mean less revenue, right? We have to understand that, right? They're driven by revenue. And so showing an improvement in the patient journey, which would help them even see more patients, is a good approach. So you're right, spot on.
Shelter, you had a really interesting perspective on balancing personalization with clinical efficacy. And I think you had a really fun analogy if you can share with the team.
Yeah, so I use this as an example. It's my own personal example. So when you go through FDA-approved product, right, you still have to show efficacy, which is well-powered and whatnot, right? So in that treatment pathway, there is less opportunity, let's be very frank, to do any personalization, right? I mean, an example I give but the engagement aspect, which I call a wraparound, right, is where we need to understand what will engage a patient, right? What will make them adherent to that particular pathway. And the example I use is that think about a cough syrup, right? So the ingredients mechanism of action, you have to keep similar to get approval or go to FDA. But whether a particular person likes cherry flavor or mango flavor, which will make them have that particular drug at the right time, is where we can be creative, right? So our focus has been to understand for engagement whether that particular woman will be more likely to stick with the therapy or stick with the program if we give her cherry flavor versus mango flavor, and at what time of the day. So we have focused in personalization with data and understanding the attributes and profile of the user and try to modify there. We have limited luxury to modify the treatment per se. That is actually, look at this as an equivalent to mechanism of action of any drug. So that's the example I give, a cough syrup example, for any pediatric care. So.
But I think what Salja's speaking to is engagement. And this level of engagement and your ability to measure engagement and drive engagement is another one of those key differentiators, because a lot of organizations don't understand that in most instances, whatever the program is that's in the market today, we have very low engagement levels. Right? I mean, think about it. Any kind of a program that's in place, very low. And if you can bring a product to market and attach to it some additional component that's going to drive higher levels of engagement, that's another key differentiator.
Yeah.
And I think a big way of showing that engagement, improving that engagement, is through the clinical studies and the clinical evidence you both have generated. Des, do you want to talk about how you've structured clinical studies for Rejoin?
Yeah, I mean, going back to women's health, if that is the topic at hand today, over 85% of the people that participated in our clinical trial for Rejoin were women. And even in the real world right now, we're seeing about 66% are women using the product. And I would argue that probably in the background, there's, again, 80% of the women are trying to make the decision on behalf of their family to go on that product. So the clinical trials spoke for themselves. I mean, that was the primary person using it was a woman. And so I think as we're looking to scale this in the future, we're trying to figure out those different partnerships and ways that we can still engage that population that obviously is using it and needs it and finds it helpful.
And I think it was critical for you, right, to achieve your FDA approval, your Class 2 distinction.
Yeah, so the way we look at FDA approval is that, the first thing is we are in postpartum depression, right? These women are not, this is one time every woman is very particular to take care of her health when she's pregnant, right? Because she knows that impacts her, infant, child, and, pregnancy. So there is multiple interactions, at least in this time frame, that woman is going to their provider. So for us, it was really important that providers reinforces that use this particular product, and to have providers reinforce usage of a product or prescribe it, you need an FDA approval. Because when we went to providers, they said, I can't just endorse any product. I need to have certain amount of evidence and comfort to do that. And then, of course, coverage is another thing. I'll just say one more thing, that the term that we have started using rather than patient journey is moments of truth. So understanding a person's moment of truth, that when is that conversion points, is how we map their journey and try to impact. For one of the moment of truth for us is when she's coming for her antenatal visit, right? That's a moment that's happening, and that's a good time. Women are very receptive. Discharge summary, they're very receptive, and they're going home with their newborn, and those are the moments that we want to use to impact and increase our engagement. So.
And along those lines, I think you've been innovative in how you find the women who need your postpartum depression program. Can you talk a little bit about your use of predictive analytics and things like that?
Yeah, so thank you for that. In all honesty, actually, our predictive analytics was an afterthought. We didn't start with that. But as we started going out and talking to many providers, it was very clear to us that even screening is not happening. If it happens, and if you're somebody like me, I completely dodged my screening, right? I just made up. I don't know how many of you do that, but I hear this very often, that my provider asked me or somebody, and I just said yes, because I didn't want to be labeled as like I have some anxiety and whatnot. So I dodged my screening, and yeah, I was pretty good at that because I knew what answers meant. So screening doesn't happen. So one of the things for us was that how do we identify these women in a proactive fashion, especially for postpartum depression. There are a lot of studies that talk about. It's sort of like a misnomer, actually, right? If you are talking about postpartum depression in postpartum period, it's actually too late often, right? So our challenge was, how do you identify these women in second trimester latest? And that's why we built our predictive tool. So the predictive tool was not built because we wanted to do some cool AI stuff. It was actually born as a need because we found out so many false EPDS, either missing or not. EPDS, means Edinburgh Postpartum Depression Scale. That's a screening that's used, but we didn't find right screening numbers. So we had to create a scale, analytic tool to do that. Yeah.
Did you want to add something, Gus?
Sure. So thank you. And that's exactly what we were speaking about earlier, I think, and that is that this engagement becomes critical. And the differentiation of the product in the market was so important. And it resonated with employers. They understood, yes, this is something that's different, and it's a tool that can help address the need because we're getting in front of the problem. And I think, again, that's just so important when you're bringing something to market. FDA, or whatever that agency approval is your going in proposition. It's step one.
Yeah.
It's not the end, right? It doesn't mean anything other than you've checked that box because everybody wants to know, has this been approved? But what are you doing differently? How are you changing the paradigm? How is it going to improve engagement and use to get to the root cause of the problem becomes the critical factor. And I think Salja and her team have been able to figure that out in a meaningful way, and it has resonated with employers and is beginning to resonate with health plans. Yeah. And I think that's the issue. But again, it can't be, your single solution in your own little vertical, because it has to fit within whatever that broad strategy is. And what we're finding is that a lot of organizations now want to begin addressing women's health. Again, I said earlier, I think it's far too late, but at least they're catching up now. And so we've got to be able to find a way to fit within that and not say that we're different from it. And that is, I think, the challenge that any organization has when bringing a product to market, because it could be the best product, but if it's isolated, then it's not really going to have much of an impact. So congratulations on it.
Yeah, I mean, just what Gus is saying, we usually, the pilots we are doing, employers have been very open to give all of their de-identified data, or even sometimes identifiable data under business associate agreement, so that we can have an analytics-driven impact. So that's really important.
Desiree, when it comes to Rejoin, how are you thinking about bringing the program to patients who have been diagnosed with MDD?
Yeah, so like I had talked about before, I think there's an opportunity to go directly to them. So many people are taking their health into their own hands, especially women. And so we do have that virtual care pathway. And then beyond that, we are planning to work with employers and also payers to make sure that there's broader adoption and broader access and availability for people that are living with depression. So it's going to take lots of different approaches to get it in the hands of people that need it, given that it's such a vast amount of people. So there's no single solution. Yeah.
And are you thinking about LevMe differently, bringing that? Because now you're approaching caregivers for people who are, they're taking care of patients with Alzheimer's.
Yeah, so LevMe was just launched as well. So that is for people that are caregiving for their families, specifically in Alzheimer's and dementia. And so we're looking at different partnerships. I think one common theme of healthcare is we can't do it alone. It's not going to be just OPH ourselves. I think we need those partnerships out there to help bring this to the people that could actually benefit from it. We've already seen good uptake, and we haven't really even done too much from a promotional standpoint yet. I think the fact that we've created solutions for problems that actually exist is probably step number one.
Yeah.
Don't create a solution without a problem. There are problems that exist. There's a lot of caregivers out there that don't know how to navigate the complexities and have questions. And so creating the solution has definitely filled a void. And so we're seeing some of that natural uptake. And then I think through partnerships, whether it's for Rejoin or for LevMe, that's going to be the best way that we scale.
Perfect. Gus, when we were talking about, you're working with health plans and really designing a program or a benefit package for an employer or you were really talking about how it needed to be holistic, right? Kind of getting away from the point solution fatigue that we've seen in the industry. Can you share a little bit more about your work and working with health plans?
Sure. So thank you. I think the issue is to understand what the health plans are capable of doing and what they're not capable of doing. Because again, as important as the employer market is, and it is important, it is the payer, right? 60% of all people that have health care coverage have it through an employer plan, right? So it's still the major employer, still the major payer. And more than 60% of those employers are self-funded. And so they make the decision day in and day out of what to cover, what not to cover, because that claims wire comes through at the end of every week, and they've got to pay those claims. So that's where they have to make sure that their programs are cost effective. And so what we've been able to do is to really help the market understand that there are ways to optimize programs. No one wants to pay more for something. But they don't want to take away benefits because it's still an issue, right? We can't find people to fill jobs, and everybody's very competitive with the people they hire. And so the solution is having a way to deliver benefits based on the needs of that population. And so we put a lot of time and effort into segmenting our populations and then working with the carriers based on what they're capable of doing. Sometimes they can't. Sometimes they can't really address something innovative. Oftentimes they do. The large carriers, they've got the capacity to invest and to test and to pilot, and a lot of that work is being done. Some of the regional blues are capable of doing that as well. But what we try to do is match up what those needs are in the market from the employer-payer perspective with what the capabilities of the plans are, and then to try to help figure out what the right approach is in a holistic way. So we're not just looking at women's mental health, but women's health in general, and really trying to find a way to bring those solutions together. And often it can be done without really changing benefits, and it can be done without having copays and deductibles apply. And you can drive it based on user preference and utilization. You think back to those commercials with the insurance companies that had car insurance, and they would reduce the deductibles, right? If based on the things that you would do right. It's the same thing here. We've put a lot of programs in place where we've been able to eliminate copays and co-insurance and deductibles, which are hurdles, right? Those are hurdles to accessing care by really driving member engagement to that. So I think there's a lot of different ways to do it. Creativity is the key in my mind.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Are there any, so you're a very quiet audience. I'm looking at this iPad and nothing's popping up. So does anybody have any questions? There are mics in the room too. I want to make sure you're getting your money's worth for this session. Anyone? Yes, please.
I think I have loud enough voice. That's what I've been told over the years. Can everyone hear me? Yes. So I'm fascinated by your app. Congratulations on that. And let's call it a digital therapeutic. How many users do you have, or what do you think scale looks like, so that it pops for everyday use and it's helping women, which is your intent?
Sorry, I'm just going to, say that. Are you asking how many users we have today?
Yeah,
So,
like what's, you talked about engagement at the beginning. What's their length of, do they finish the entire solution?
yeah. So the users we have today are more in a test environment, right? So we have PEACE, which was our FDA study, but then we wanted to test out that without paying, how many users will get. And the key idea was not to study efficacy, was to your point to figure out the engagement strategy, right? So in total in our app, around 2,500 women. Our FDA study was only 196 powered study. We had done 3 studies, but our pivotal study was 196 patients. But in total, we have about 2,500 women in a soft launch. Actually more, we have 2 health plan, 2 employers where we did also soft launch. So kind of like little less than 3,000, something like that. The rest of the population, minus the FDA study, which was a very structured study, right? We found out that the biggest hump, if I may say, happens in getting them onboarded, right? Once they're on board and somebody goes through the platform for 4 or 5 days, at least, then we start getting very comfortable that they stay with the program. And we have made our own internal matrix that we will look at 80% finish time, like 80% they have to complete and touch every aspect of the program is what we call engagement, right? So we have actually an engagement heat map that we are able to see the depth of engagement and whatnot. So I would say most 75% and above remain 80% engaged, meaning they do 80% of the program. So but the biggest hump or drop-off happens at the beginning, and that's where we have to make effort to make sure that they remain they start their journey. Because oftentimes the feedback we heard was, oh, I didn't understand, right? That's the big thing. What is it gonna do? I thought it's an app. Or I didn't understand, I thought I don't have time and it's going to take up a lot of my time. So those initial dialogue has become really important for us too. And when we had this 2,000 women, I want to emphasize, again, minus the FDA study, we did not have any human component. So what we are finding, I think that Des did mention that in the beginning, that if we add a human aspect, which we have added in some of the employer programs, then we are able to take care of that initial friction, because perhaps the coach is able to explain really well why exactly you need to do this program. So these 2,000 or so women were more or less all done without any human aspect, and adding a human aspect that we have just done with our Jan soft launch, we were able to see better engagement. I mean, this one, a smaller N, but we have perhaps 85 to 90% engagement. But I have to say this. We also got, I think, lucky, because women do want to get better, especially in their postpartum phase, and they're truly looking for. So I would love to say that it's 100% because of our technology, but I think it's population too. Right? It's a very different engaged population generally.
Desiree, did you want to comment on how to onboard patients? It's such an important part of, you should say people, it's such an important part of getting, new people to use the technology, stay on the technology, get better with the technology solution.
Yeah, I think setting expectations is probably one of the key learnings that we've had over the years, whether it's a drug, a device, anything, setting expectations up front to understand not only the process that they're going to go through, so it's very super clear on how long it's going to take, how much it's going to cost, all the things that you would think as just a consumer. You want to know that up front so you know what you're getting into. So that's one of the big hurdles. Also, working through that process probably at the beginning to make sure that we're answering questions. I agree with you. I think the first big drop-off is really that onboarding time at the beginning. And then once they're on, it is a decline, just with any adherence. So we find that those touch points in between, we do several different check-ins, and we're modeling that based on the behaviors that we see. But generally, we have that 2-week check-in, and we've had actual patients say, I'm not sure that this is, easy enough for me, or this is difficult, I'm not sure I'm doing it right. And so to have somebody sort of coach them through that has enabled them to stay on treatment, and they feel like they understand better. So I think those touch points are so vital, and something that I think people have really responded to. There's not too often where you get good feedback on a quote-unquote support center, but we actually do. So it's something that we're really proud of, because that personalization with the digital product we find is really key.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nita. Such a pleasure to be here today. I'm a founder of an early-stage company. We're doing digital phenotyping and remote patient monitoring to increase efficacy of interventions. And we're early stage. We're spun out from Northeastern University, and now we're trying to raise a pre-seed, and we are caught up in the efficacy and customer matrix with raising money. We're speaking to VC companies, and they want us to already have customers before they invest in pre-seed, which is kind of crazy, but they also want to have those efficacy metrics. We are data-based. We need the pre-seed money to run data analysis, but we don't want to launch too early, because we see that happen in the space. People launch too early and then they fail. And I was wondering how you were able to manage that uncomfortable relationship in the beginning.
I wish I had an answer for you. Maybe I can just share my own personal pain points, offline. But yeah, it's tough. There is a lot of proof points that I asked for. I don't think so. I have in all honesty, I don't have a answer for you, like how to approach that. Perhaps try to find VCs who will be willing to buy your story and what you are going after. But I understand, as I talk to a lot of VCs, and there are so many solutions that come to them every day. There are so many digital solutions that come to them every day that perhaps they have to see where there is some data versus where there is concept. But I'll be happy to share my own journey and pain points, but I don't think so I have in all honesty, an answer for you that how to approach it. Every VC is going to be different.
Well, Gus, we talked about really polishing your value proposition, right? And going to VCs and really having a good pitch, and why is your solution different? What impact is it going to make in the market? But Gus, you're the expert. Maybe you can share a few thoughts.
Yeah, I think the key is to try to find, as you were saying, the balance. But I think it's a balance between what is there any market acceptance as early as possible, right? To be able to prove your point. The lab, if you will, is one part of the process, but it's not where you're going to be getting funding. You've got to find a way to pilot or partner with somebody. There's always a willing partner. It's just a matter of uncovering it. And I think it starts with really dissecting kind of your program, your product, and figuring out from a segmentation perspective, who's up in that top quadrant. Is it an employer based on the type of workforce that they have? Is it a special interest group based on who they work with? Is it organized labor because, a percentage of people are women or whatever the case may be? I mean, figuring out where that segment of the market is the most approachable, and then zeroing in on them and trying to create some pilots, some interest, some initiative. Because early on, that's all you can sell. Look, we've had this conversation. Here's interest, here's demand. We've done a study, we've put something in place, here's a white paper. I think, as Sal just said, you'll find firms that will fund based on that, but generally, if you're just going out as broad as possible, I think they're going to be looking for revenue, and you're not going to be able to do it. So find a way to segment and to really find that organization, those organizations that were willing to partner with you in some way that you can then take out to those funding sources.
Yeah, I can perhaps, that's a very good point. I can just add to what Gus said. We deliberately actually made a class 1 device and went for a FDA with our second device, right? The class 1 device, the whole purpose was to understand the patient journey and engagement, because you have more flexibility to test out things. And then we found out some really good partners, and we have been testing this way before we got any approval from FDA, but more in a class 1 environment. And primary purpose was exactly to understand patient journey, engagement. That's the heavy focus of our class 1. And then when we got approval this year, we will be looking at now health plans and launch next year. We have not launched our class 2 device. So I think, you really raised a good point, Gus. It's really important to come out of lab early on, and we didn't have luxury, like as a startup company, to be in the lab for very long. Like we knew that we have to go out and start talking and experimenting and getting some data to prove. So, yeah.
So in our last few minutes, I guess as a closing question, I'd like you all to answer. How do you see the environment changing over the next 1 to 2 years in terms of mental health innovation and digital health products? Or what do you hope changes, maybe back to our earlier conversation, Desiree, about how tough it is to really bring solutions to the market?
Hope is a good one.
Yeah, hope is not a strategy, though. But no, I think I'm going to manifest that we are going to see broader coverage of digital therapeutics, because it's getting in the hands of people that need them, in the palm of their hand, literally, and sort of on demand. So I think there is going to be broader adoption. I think with the new CMS rule that came out, I think that's a really good step forward, and I think that's going to really change the marketplace moving forward. So more adoption.
Okay, I was going to think that it would be good to wrap it up, but I think what I see on the horizon are clearly adoption of digital therapeutics. I think women's health will become critically more important moving forward. I think women's mental health will become critically more important moving forward. It's not where it needs to be yet in terms of the focus. But I think the success factor will be those organizations that kind of find a way to work horizontally rather than vertically. Who are the other partners in the market that are approaching this segment but with something different? And how can you work with them so that you're working in a solution that's minimizing all of that white space for the payer to see, here's a holistic opportunity to address a phenomenon or a problem in the market, and I don't have to, as a payer, think about contracting or working with 4 or 5 different organizations. These 3 or 4 are able to partner together, and they're offering me a solution that they're willing to white label and that I'm willing to pay for. So I think that's the differentiation of what we'll see in the next couple of years.
Wonderful. As we say at ZS, healthcare is a team sport. Everyone has to participate in order to move the needle forward. So I want to thank the panelists for a great conversation. Thank you all for joining.